أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والنازعات غرقا والناشطات نشطا والسابحات سبحا فالسابقات سبقا فالمدبرات أمرا يوم ترجف الراجفة تتبعها الرادفة قلوب يومئذ واجفة أبصارها خاشعة يقولون أئنا لمردودون في الحافرة أئذا كنا عظاما نخرة قالوا تلك إذا كرة خاسرة فإنما هي زجرة واحدة فإذا هم بالساهرة هل أتاك حديث موسى إذ ناداه ربه بالوادي المقدس طوى اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى فقل هل لك إلى أن تزكى وأهديك إلى ربك فتخشى فأراه الآية الكبرى فكذب وعصى ثم أدبر يسعى فحشر فنادى فقال أنا ربكم الأعلى فأخذه الله نكال الآخرة والأولى إن في ذلك لعبرة لمن يخشى أأنتم أشد خلقا أم السماء بناها رفع سمكها فسواها وأغطش ليلها وأخرج ضحاها والأرض بعد ذلك دحاها أخرج منها ماءها ومرعاها والجبال أرساها متاعا لكم ولأنعامكم فإذا جاءت الطامة الكبرى يوم يتذكر الإنسان ما سعى وبرزت الجحيم لمن يرى فأما من طغى وآثر الحياة الدنيا فإن الجحيم هي المأوى وأما من خاف مقام ربه ونهى النفس عن الهوى فإن الجنة هي المأوى يسألونك عن الساعة أيان مرساها فيما أنت من ذكراها إلى ربك منتهاها إنما أنت منذر من يخشاها كأنهم يوم يرونها لم يلبثوا إلا عشية أو ضحاها. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Inshallah ta'ala, we shall carry on with the same topic we were talking about last week, and that was the taqwa of Allah. And we mentioned that the taqwa of Allah is a shield that you put between yourself and the punishment of Allah and His anger. And we also mentioned that which fuels this taqwa is the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and being scared of Allah, and knowing who Allah is. And today, to put this khawf, this fear, this taqwa into perspective, I want to mention the story of a great man that lived, and the man whom we perceive to be from al-muttaqeen and from those who feared Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This man is considered to be the fifth of the Khulafa al-Rashidin. As we know, the Khulafa al-Rashidin are Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman and Ali, the four Khulafa. A lot of the scholars mention that the fifth of these Khulafa is none other than this man. This man came at a time where the Banu Umayyah were upon a lot of injustice and oppression. And the earth at that time was nearly filled with injustice. The place, the earth, the governorship, the land that were governed by the Muslimin at that time, there was a lot of injustice. This man is none other than Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, rahimahullahu ta'ala. And there's a lot to say about this man, and perhaps another day we will make the talk exclusive about his seerah and his biography and what he did and how the time was before his time and how he changed things. But because of the time, and like I said, it probably needs a full lecture just to talk about his biography. And even then, that wouldn't be enough to talk about Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. But today, I just want to mention some things about his life and about his seerah that really point out and bring out the fear that he had of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Perhaps it may be a benefit for myself and the listeners. With Umar ibn Abdul Aziz and the points that I wanted to mention about his khawf, I don't even know where to start from, because there's so much to talk about. The khawf of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. One of the tabi'een, rahimahullah ta'ala, once said, ما رأيت أزهد ولا أخوف لله من عمر ibn Abdul Aziz. I have not seen anyone with more zuhud. Zuhud is the Arabic terminology for someone who leaves off the dunya, or he prefers the dunya, the akhirah over the dunya, and as a result he takes as little as he can from the dunya. ولا أخوف, and not more fearful from Allah than Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he was only Khalifa for about 2 years and a few months. And whoever reads his seerah and his biography and reads about what he did in these 2 years and a few months, he would think that what he did in this time could only be done in 20 years, 10 years, 20 years maybe. He did in these 2 years and a half that which anyone else would have done in 10 years, or maybe 20. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, when he became a Khalifa, he completely extinguished poverty in the Ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Bearing in mind that at that time, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz was the ruler of a huge part of the world. During his time, the Muslim Ummah had extended to modern day India and Afghanistan And from the west, the northern part of Africa, even some parts of Spain. This was after the time of Tariq ibn Ziyad rahimahullah ta'ala. You can imagine how vast his rulership was, and the lands that he ruled over, how vast they were, and where they extended from till. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz managed to extinguish poverty in the Ummah. There wasn't anyone left to give from Bayt al-Mal, from the wealth of the Muslimin. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, before the time of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, there was the previous kings a lot of them were unjust, and a lot of them would take the wealth for themselves. And generally speaking, this is what the muluk do, people of leadership and people of wealth and position. They use that time that they have in their rule to satisfy themselves as much as possible, gain as much wealth, keep as much wealth, entertain themselves as much as possible. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, on the other hand, when he became Khalifa, his children were asked, how much wealth did your father have when he became Khalifa? Umar ibn Abdul Aziz had 50,000 dinar, which was a lot of wealth. A lot of wealth. And then they asked him, how much did he have when he passed away? And if I'm not mistaken, it was something like 40. He left his children poor. So he became Khalifa, and we need to understand, the Khalifa is basically the king. He's the king of the Muslimin. He's the king of the Ummah, of a nation, of a land that extended from India all the way to Spain. And he passes away, and he barely has any money for him and his children. There's a story where Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, it was the evening of Eid. The next day would have been the day of Eid. And his wife comes to him, and she says to him, Ya Umar, we don't have enough money to buy our children new clothes. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, any of his wealth, he would spend it in fi sabilillah, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and for the sake of the ummah. And he would restrict himself with the salary he would receive from Bayt al-Mal to the extent that he wouldn't find enough money to buy his own children new Eid clothes. So she said to him, why don't you go to Bayt al-Mal, which is the wealth of the Muslimin, the khaza'in, the place where they would keep the money that would be distributed for the Muslims, for the Ummah. Why don't you go and take an advance payment? So the next salary, the salary of the next month, take it so that you could buy your children some Eid clothes. So Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he went to the man who he appointed to be the guardian of that wealth. Remember, he's the Khalifa. He's the ruler of the Muslims. He's the king. So he appoints whom he wills in different positions. So he went to the one who he appointed to be the guardian or to be entrusted with the wealth of the Muslims. And he asked him, is it okay if I take an advance payment of my next month's salary And the next month I will do what I can to pay it back. Yani, I will do whatever I have to do to pay it back. So this man said, if you can guarantee that you will live another month and pay back this wealth that you will take from Bayt al-Mal, then you can. If not, then I won't give you any of that wealth. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz could have easily said, this wealth is all mine, give it all to me. Or taking him away from his position and just taking the wealth. But Umar ibn Abdul Aziz was so God-fearing. He had so much khawf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he had to go back to his family and talk to his children and tell them this Eid we won't be able to get new clothes. And the next day he gave the khutbah al-Eid, and when he saw his children, he saw all the other children, the people of leadership, the people of positions, all their children with new clothes, and even the general people, all their children with new clothes, and the sons of the Khalifa, all of them didn't have any new clothes. He started to cry. And then his children said to him, "Oh father, you have made us proud on this day, because you have showed that your love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is more than your love for your children." Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, when he became a Khalifa, he gave up wealth. His main focus was to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and no one else. So his wife Fatima ibn Abdul Malik, and Fatima ibn Abdul Malik, the wife of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, the scholars, they mentioned that she was a princess from 7 different ways. She wasn't just a princess because she was the son of a king. She was a princess from 7 different ways. Her father was a king. Her grandfather was a king. A lot of her brothers were kings, and so on and so forth. And she was a princess in 7 different ways. This was the woman who she was. رحمها الله رحمة واسعة. When Umar ibn Abdul Aziz became Khalifa, he gave her a choice. He made it clear to her the life he was about to live. And he gave her a choice to stay with him and have sabr upon all of this, or to leave him. Fatima ibn Abdul Malik, she decided she chose the side of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger, and she decided to stay with Umar ibn Abdul Aziz and to have patience upon that which they encounter. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz one day, so the reason, some people might be confused and think, why did he have to go through all of this when wealth is permissible for wealth is permissible for Ibn Adam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't make a lot of wealth haram upon the son of Adam. Likewise, a lot of the companions were wealthy. So there's nothing wrong with being rich, like the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, نِعْمَ الْمَالُ الصَّالِحِ لِلرَّجُلِ الصَّالِحِ. Blessed is the righteous wealth, meaning the wealth that hasn't been acquired through haram means. Blessed is that wealth for the righteous slave, the righteous wealth for the righteous slave. Because the righteous slave will use this wealth in that which pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he'll only use this wealth to become closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Abdurrahman ibn Auf, for example, from the most wealthiest of his time. Abdurrahman ibn Auf was from the Ashra Mubashirin. He was from the 10 promised Jannah. from the great companions of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He had abundant wealth. He was very wealthy. So someone might say, what is wrong with having, why did he go to that extent? You see, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he just came after a time where the kings of the kings of Bani Umayyah would keep the money, the wealth of the Muslimin for themselves. And they would take lands because they were Bani Umayyah. And once he became a Khalifa, he made it upon himself to return everything that was taken unjustly back to the Muslimin. So people from the royal family who had acquired a lot of wealth, he ordered that everything would be given back to the Muslimin, to the Bayt al-Mal. Lands were taken, wealth, a lot of things, jewelry were taken back to the Muslims, and he ordered that they be distributed to those who were in need. Until there wasn't anyone. There was no poverty left. There wasn't anyone in need left. In order for him to do that, he himself had to adhere. He had to be someone who wasn't indulged in the dunya. So he would limit himself to the dunya. He would limit himself with the dunya so that he sets the example for his family members. And Umar ibn Abdul Aziz would only he'd be so faithful of what he takes from the wealth of the Muslimin, in fear that he takes a little bit more than what he needs, and that he will be questioned for it Yawm al-Qiyamah. So Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, after he became a Khalifa, he lived a life of poverty. The opposite of what would happen to anyone else. Once he becomes a Khalifa, other than the Sahaba and the Khulafa al-Rashideen, people take the wealth for themselves. So it was not easy on his wife and on his children, but they had sabr for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz was someone who would constantly cry at night. His night would be qiyam al-layl, and fear and tears. And his day would be a day where he would establish justice, and he would establish the truth. And he would constantly cry, rahimahullah ta'ala. One day, he was with his wife in bed, and he would tell her and he would remind her. So before he was Khalifa, before he was the ruler, he was a governor of certain lands. And he had decent amount of wealth. And he would remind his wife what he used to do for her in these times. He would say to her, do you remember that so-and-so time when I did this and this for you, and I went here and here for you, and did this and this for you? So she would say to him, وَأَنْتَ الْيَوْمِ أَقْدَرُ عَلَى إِمْتَاعِي مِنْ أَنْ كُنْتَ آنَذَاكَ. You are today in a position, in a more favorable position, or in a position where you are able to entertain me more so than the positions you were in before. Today you are Khalifa. You are the ruler of the Muslim lands. Back then you were only governor upon some lands, upon some cities. So Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, rahimahullah ta'ala, he put his hand on the thigh of his wife, and he said, Ya Fatima, inni akhafu an-nar. Ya Fatima, inni akhafu an-nar. He would say to her, Oh Fatima, I fear the fire of Jahannam. Oh Fatima, I fear the fire of Jahannam. And this is what fueled his taqwa and fueled his actions. His fear of Allah and his fear of Jahannam. To the extent that he left the dunya and everything with it. Once he prayed. He prayed salah, and he sat down and he started weeping. Every time he would breathe air in, he would take a breath, his wife would think that this is his last breath. The extent he was crying, the extent he was crying was that every time he would take a breath, from how much he's crying and how severe it is, she would think that this is it. The Muslimin will wake up tomorrow with no Khalifa. With no Khalifa. So she said to him the next day, she said, what happened to you last night was a lot. It was a lot. Is everything okay? So Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he said, أو كما قال, he said that he remembered the amana of the ummah upon him. And that if someone had one khasm, he remembered the amana of the ummah upon him, the weight of the responsibility of the ummah upon him. And that is what caused his fear and his bukat and his tears. He was constantly fearing the responsibility that he had upon him. And as a result, when he passed away, he could have left his children with a lot of wealth. He could have left his children with a lot of wealth and taken it from the Bayt al-Mal and left it for them as inheritance. But before he passed away, he gathered his children and he said to them, my dear children, I was given the choice. Either I leave my children as fuqara, I leave them poor and I enter al-Jannah, or I leave them rich and I enter Jahannam, and I enter an-nar. So he's telling his children to please understand. He said, however, inna waliyya Allahu fikum wa huwa yatawalla as-salihin. But my successor, or the one whom I leave after me for you, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he is the one who is the wali, the protector, the friend of the righteous ones. So he left them with no wealth. Imagine the Khalifa, you are a son of a Khalifa, of a ruler, of great lands, huge lands. And when he passes away, you do not inherit anything because he didn't leave anything for you to inherit. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz would say about this, he would say, if my sons, my children, or either one of the two, if one of them is righteous and he has taqwa, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقُهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, whoever has taqwa of Allah, Allah will find for him a opening. From any closed situation, from any difficulty, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will find for him an opening. And he will provide for him from means that he did not even perceive. And if he was someone who is disobedient, then I will not leave for him that through which he will use as a means to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But look how fast Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replaced the wealth for his children. One of his children, not long after his father passed away, he gave in sadaqah 100 horses. In sadaqah, 100 horses. So you could see the replacement that Allah Azza wa Jalla replaced very soon these children with, as they were pleased with that which Allah Azza wa Jalla had divided for them and had left them with. So Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, during this time, he used it to establish justice on the earth and to give back that which was taken unjustly to the Muslims. And during that time, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he made sure that the hadith was written down and books of hadith were compiled. And he gave ulama positions. And he only gave positions of authority to people who deserved it. Not because he liked someone or because someone was from his family. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he established the haqq, rahimahullahu ta'ala, rahmatan wasi'ah. And there's a lot to say, there's too much to say about Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. Too much to say about Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. And one thing to mention is that Umar ibn Abdul Aziz didn't seek the Khilafah. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, the Khilafah was so heavy on him. He couldn't imagine one day that he would be taking it upon his shoulders. He would run away from the Khilafah. But Sulaiman, the previous king, he wrote him as a successor after his death. So he had to take it upon him. And it is said that Sulaiman ibn Abdul Malik, when he wrote the successor who would succeed him in the Khilafah, he wrote on a piece of paper who it would be, and he said that it shouldn't be open until he passes away. So what the norm would be at that time is that the eldest son would become the Khalifa. The eldest son would become the Khalifa, and it would be passed on like this. But Sulaiman changed that, and he put the name of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz to be the Khalifa. So when this old paper was opened in front of the people after his death, from that gathering, 2 people fainted. This is something that is mentioned. 2 people fainted. The first being the son of Sulaiman, because he was expecting his name to be there, because he is the son of the Khalifa. When it wasn't his name, he fainted. And the second person who fainted was Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, because of the weight of the Khilafah, because of how much he didn't want to be the Khalifa. When he became the Khalifa, he went to give a khutbah to the people, stand in front of the people. And he said to them that I have become the Khalifa min ghayri raghbatin minni, and I haven't sought it. I didn't want to be the Khalifa. I haven't sought this. Obey me as long as I obey Allah, and disobey me as long as I disobey Allah. And he said, I free myself from this Khilafah. I free myself from being someone. I free myself from having put this Khilafah upon myself. And he said, if you're not pleased with me as Khalifa, then take me off and appoint someone who's better than me. And they all said, قد رضينا بك يا عمر قد رضينا بك يا عمر. We are all pleased with you, Umar. We are all pleased with you, Ya Umar. And he then became the Khalifa, and he lived the life that we mentioned with the weight that he had upon his shoulders because of his fear. And the story of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz reminds me of the story of Umar ibn al-Khattab, which Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, funny enough, is from the lineage of Umar ibn al-Khattab. The granddaughter of Umar ibn al-Khattab, Layla bint Asim bint Umar, was married to the father of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. And it's mentioned that Umar ibn al-Khattab saw a dream, and it is from the aqwal that are transmitted from Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, that a man from his progeny with a mark on his head would come and fill the earth with justice after it was filled with injustice. So when Umar ibn Abdul Aziz was a young man, and he was in the stable of his father, a horse hit him in the head, in the face. So when his father saw that, he said, "In kunta ashajju bani Umayyah, innaka idhan lasa'id." If you are the ashaj is someone with a mark on his head. If you are that man that Umar radiallahu anhu had mentioned, that would rule the Muslimin and would fill the earth with justice, then you are a happy person. So he was pleased when he went home and he saw that he was left with a permanent mark on his head, because he saw that as a sign that that Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, this would be the man who would fill the earth with justice. So I was saying that the story of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz reminds me of the story of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. When he would go around the streets of Al-Madinah looking for people who are in need, and people whom his men would have missed. And the famous story of the woman who didn't have enough to fulfill her needs, and Umar came across her, and she complained to him about Umar, and she didn't know it was Umar that she was speaking to. And Umar ibn al-Khattab anhu, fawran, straight away he went to get some food for this woman. And this man, his servant, told him, "Let me take the load off you. Let me take it to her." And he said to him, "Are you the one who will carry my sins Yawm al-Qiyamah? Are you the one who will carry my responsibility Yawm al-Qiyamah?" And this was the hal of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, so fearful of the question of the ummah. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz was very similar in that. And when he became a Khalifa, he told the ulama and the pious people to advise him. And from the advices that he received from one of them was that if you had one khasam, one person who had a haqq upon you that you didn't give him in the dunya, it would be enough for you Yawm al-Qiyamah. If any of us has someone who he did not give him his right in the dunya, just one person for one thing, it will be enough for this person to be worried Yawm al-Qiyamah, that this person will come and ask for his haqq Yawm al-Qiyamah. So how is it if it's the ummah of Muhammad asking for the haqq from you? And this deeply affected Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. And that made him strive in the Khilafah and in being just. And so he did. And look at what he did in 2 years and a few months. This was the story of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, and some parts of his story which show the fear that Umar ibn Abdul Aziz had. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from those who fear him like he deserves to be feared. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to unite us with the likes of Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, and to enter us into Jannah with them. اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا وعافنا واعف عنا. اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا. اللهم إنك عفو كريم تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم اقسم لنا من خشيتك ما تحول به بيننا وبين معاصيك. اللهم إنا نسألك خشيتك في الغيب والشهادة. اللهم آت نفوسنا تقواها. اللهم آت نفوسنا تقواها وزكها أنت خير من زكاها أنت وليها ومولاها. اللهم اعتقنا من النار. اللهم اعتقنا من النار. اللهم اعتقنا من النار. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
This Adhan is sponsored by Pack Foods, where the world comes to shop.